Welcome to the Mills Family Part 2C, which follows the Daniel Morris Mills line and focuses on Caroline Amanda Mills and Fred J. Smith. We'll start with our family tree. Mom's parents were Dorothy Estelle Fleming and Edward Guy Doherty. Edward's parents were John J. Doherty and Lillian May Mills. Lily's parents were Abby Bell Cotton and Harvey Orestes Mills, and Harvey's parents were Daniel Morris Mills and Elvira Eliza Denison. Daniel and Elvira had 7 children together. Caroline Amanda was their third. Caroline Amanda Mills was born on February 3, 1855 at the Hart Settlement in Macomb County, Michigan, now known as Chesterfield. She was the last child born on the first bit of property her parents bought when they arrived in Michigan nearly 10 years prior. In 1845, Daniel walked from New York to Chesterfield with Elvira's uncle, Eber Cowles Denison, in order to survey the land before making a decision about moving. They found the area suitable, then walked back to New York to collect their families. When they arrived in 1846, Daniel and Elvira purchased 80 acres near 23 Mile Road and Gratiot Avenue. Shortly after Caroline's birth, the family moved to what would be their permanent residence, 30 acres purchased from her grandfather, Hiram Denison. The property was located on Burden Road in Chesterfield, just north of the town line of New Baltimore, Michigan. At the time, New Baltimore was the second largest town in Macomb County after Mount Clemens. Throughout Caroline's childhood, manufacturing was the primary industry of the city of Mount Clemens, shipping all kinds of goods out of Anchor Bay. The railroad arrived not long after Caroline, bringing expansion with it. This is the same line that Thomas Edison worked on, selling newspapers and candy, and the same station where he saved a young child's life. As a child, it's possible that Caroline spent her free time involved in the usual activities that our children enjoy today: fishing, boating, and swimming in the summer, ice skating and sledding in the winter. After the family moved to the Burden Road farm, Caroline's parents purchased adjoining land, 20 acres to the east, 40 across the road to the west, plus Hiram's remaining 10, so that by 1868 the farm consisted of 100 acres. The family had grown too, with the last baby, number 7, arriving that year. By 1870, their farm was valued at $5,000 and was home to Daniel and Elvira, their children, Hiram, Caroline, Harvey, Susan, Festus, and Jenny, Elvira's parents, Hiram and Patience Denison, and also her widowed sister-in-law, Lydia West Denison, and her 8-year-old son, Irvin. Besides the people, they also had 4 horses, 8 cows, 12 sheep, and 6 pigs. They raised corn, winter wheat, oats, and buckwheat. Caroline A. Mills was listed twice on the 1870 census. She's also in the household of her uncle, Fester Erastus Denison, at Milan, Ohio, in Erie County. Uncle Fester had come to Michigan with the original group in 1846 and had married Caroline Carey, also part of that group from New York, but the couple had moved on to Ohio after several years. Caroline Mills wasn't the only child living with Uncle Fester and Aunt Caroline around that time. Her brother, Eber Mills, had come to Ohio with plans to become a blacksmith like Uncle Fester. Soon after arriving, he found the profession of tile manufacturing more to his liking and took up an apprenticeship with Uncle Fester's neighbor, Mr. Fish the tile maker. He also took a liking to Mr. Fish's housekeeper, Mary Hub. The third child in the household was Aunt Caroline Carey Denison's niece, 16-year-old Lucy Seeley Ford. Lucy would eventually become an in-law of the Mills children when her brother marries their sister Jenny near the end of the century. Like Eber, the young ladies were in Milan to receive vocational training. They attended the Western Reserve Normal School and studied to be teachers. Caroline Mills returned to Michigan sometime between 1874 and 1878. Her first placement as a teacher was in her home district, and her youngest sister Jenny was among her first students. When Eber returned, he established his tile-making business in Lenox, Michigan, just north of the rest of the family. Caroline kept house for him while he made preparations to return to Milan and wed Mary Huff, which he did in the fall of 1879. Caroline's next teaching position was in Wilson, Michigan, in Alpena County. In 1880, she was boarding with the Davis family there, along with fellow boarder Fred J. Smith. Caroline and Fred married in nearby Long Rapids, Michigan in the fall of 1881 when they were both 26. Not much is known about Fred before his life with Caroline. He was working in the lumber camps when they met. He was born in Bangor, Maine on January 15, 1855, just 19 days before Caroline's birthday. His father was Edward Elmer Smith, but his mother's name is unknown. His father married again to Ellen Dorr, who raised Fred. Katie R. Mills, the family historian, writes that Edward E. Smith was a sailor and that Fred followed in his father's footsteps at age 12. He continued in this line of work until he was 24. On July 24, 1882, Caroline's father, Daniel Morris Mills, died from heart issues at the age of 59. Caroline and Fred were still in Alpena County, where their first child was born in September. Shortly after, Caroline and Fred moved to a small farm near her family's farm on Burden Road, then to New Haven, Michigan, near her brother Ever. They had 5 children together, the first 3 born in Michigan. In 1888, Fred, Caroline, and the 3 kids moved to Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Edward E. Smith was born there in 1890. Then they continued west to Spokane, Washington, where their 5th and final child, Walter Eugene Smith, was born in 1892. Ads like this one were widely circulated at the time, and many settlers heeded the call thanks to the recent expansion of the railway lines. Shortly before our Mills family arrived in Spokane, an incident occurred that would come to be known as the Great Fire. It began on the evening of August 4, 1889, in the downtown commercial district. Some of the buildings could have been saved had it not been for a faulty pump station that deprived the city lines of water pressure. A last-ditch effort was made to starve the fire by demolishing buildings with dynamite before they could catch, and proved successful. However, in the end, 1 life and 32 city blocks of buildings were lost. It was a blessing in disguise for Spokane. Many of the wooden buildings built during the original population boom were nearing the end of their usefulness anyway. About half of them were insured, and, with the help of new investors, the city was able to rebuild quickly, this time on a sturdy foundation of stone and brick. Caroline, Fred, and the kids were still in Spokane, Washington when the census was taken in 1900. At the time, Fred and Caroline were 45, and the children ranged from 8 to 17. Fred was working as a contractor on one of the city's numerous building projects. In 1902, they moved to Vay, Idaho, about 50 miles northeast of Spokane. Beginning in 1913, they married off 1 child a year for 3 consecutive years, then the last 2 at the beginning and end of 1919. That same year, Fred and Caroline moved to Copeland, Idaho, near the Canadian border, to be closer to one of the children. One of their sons, Edward Elmer Smith, Ph.D., had an impressive career not only in science, but science fiction as well. He graduated from the University of Idaho in 1914 with 2 degrees in chemical engineering. Edward married in 1915 and was employed by the government, working for the National Bureau of Standards in Washington, D.C., developing standards for butter and oysters, while earning his master's degree in chemistry from George Washington University, which he received in 1917. He completed his Ph.D. in chemical engineering the following year. In 1919, Edward and his wife, Jeannie Craig McDougall Smith, moved to Hillsdale, Michigan, where he was a chief chemist at F.W. Stock & Company, working on donut mixes. His career eventually led him to work with and hold stock in the Dawn Donut Company in the 1930s, followed by creating explosives for the U.S. military in the 1940s. Edward's stories were first published in the late 1920s, soon to be followed by numerous novels under the name E. Doc Smith. He came to be known as the father of the space opera, and his novels inspired not only the likes of George Lucas, Ron Howard, and Jerry Siegel, but also real-world military innovation in the form of battleship design. It was while visiting Edward and his family in Hillsdale, Michigan, that Caroline passed away in 1927. She was 72 when she suffered a fatal stroke heart attack. Fred married again nearly 2 years later on Christmas Eve to Anna L. Naylor Little Strevel, age 61. He's pictured here with his daughter-in-law, Jeannie. Anna was the oldest of 12 children. She was born in Alpena, Michigan, where Fred and Caroline had met nearly 35 years earlier, and she, too, had been a teacher. Anna didn't have any children. She didn't marry until the age of 42 in 1909. The marriage was short, and she married again in 1916 in Detroit. That marriage, too, was short, and she divorced in 1921 on the grounds of extreme cruelty. After Fred and Anna married in 1928, they ran a boarding house in Detroit for quite some time. Fred was 90 when he died of a stroke in 1945. He's buried next to Caroline and near the Mills family at Oakwood Cemetery in New Baltimore, Michigan. Anna died 4 years later in Alpena, Michigan at the age of 82.